Thanks, Rabbi Mark. Really lovely to be with you. And thanks, Rachel. And great to be with everyone. I love to have it on gallery view and see everyone's beautiful faces and a little tiny piece of the world where we all are. So I'm going to share a brief teaching on the Parsha and then we'll do a practice based on it. We have a double Parsha, Matot Maseh, and I'm going to talk about the beginning of Maseh. Maseh means the journeys, and these are the journeys of the children of Israel. El Maseh B'nai Israel. And the Hasidic read of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, which then his students will elaborate on in their own way, is that these are actually the journeys of our lives. These 42 journeys, which interestingly, it's 42, but it's also 49 because 49 is a very important number in Kabbalah. So they explain how there are actually seven extra stages which go back on the same places. So there are 42 enumerated, so 42 places, but actually 49 journeys according to the Kabbalah. And these journeys, however many there are, the Kabbalists say represent the stages of our own lives. From the narrow place, which we can interpret as the birth canal, the narrow place is Mitzrayim, where the people leave the place of constriction, and going to the promised land of, hopefully becoming our best possible selves and eventually, please God, at the right time, passing on from this earthly sphere in the best possible way. That's the ideal way that the journey will hopefully go for everyone. And the Baal Shem Tov himself used to say when he was in a certain place or situation sometimes, oh, this physical place where I am and this situation that I'm in reminds me of this thing that happened to the children of Israel in the wilderness. And, there's some test or lesson that, happened there for them that I'm going through now in my own way. We can map it like that, and some of the teachers do, or it can be, a more general sense of that progression. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, the great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, he has a very beautiful lesson about those journeys for us. He says that there's a connection the sages make, the ancient rabbis make, between those 42 journeys and atoning for the golden calf, which is interesting because technically, if we look at the narrative in the Torah, the reason the people have to travel in the desert so long is not actually the sin of the golden calf. If we look at the literal level, it's because of the sin of the spies. That's the mistake they make, and after which they're told, okay, you guys can't go into the land. You're going to have to just wait a whole generation, and then, hopefully your kids will, which is what happens. But the rabbis sense that the mistake of the golden calf was archetypal in some way, and that even though the decree of 40 years did not follow from the golden calf, still the rabbis sense that that's really what set things up for that all that wandering. So the verse I mentioned before at the beginning of Parshat Maseh is, these are the journeys of the children of Israel, Ele Maseh B'nai Israel. And when the people build the golden calf, Rabbi Nachman makes this connection based on the sages. The people say, these are your gods, O Israel. So it's very similar language. When they make the golden calf, they say, these are your gods who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So again, Rabbi Nachman, drawing on the ancient rabbis, is saying that there was some spiritual work to do in the journeying, which fixed whatever was going wrong at the golden calf. And interestingly, the thing that he thinks that needs to be fixed, that all of our journeying hopefully helps us fix, is compassion. And specifically, he says, what we need is to become active agents of compassion. And he finds a verse in the book of Bereshit in Genesis where Jacob says to his sons, to most of them, who are at this point in the story with Jacob's sons, they're going up and down to Egypt, and they don't know that they're dealing with their long lost brother Joseph, who they think they're looking for. They don't know they found him because he's disguised as a powerful Egyptian. And Jacob says to his sons, may God have compassion on you. Because Jacob senses his sons are in a pretty difficult situation. In fact, he senses that the whole family's in a difficult situation. So he says, may God have compassion on you. And the acronym of that verse, if we take the first letter of each word of that verse, is Yisrael, our name as a people, Israel. And Rabbi Nachman says, this is our journey of the 42 or 49 journeys of our life. And this is what it means to try and be a real Yisrael, someone who, we interpret Yisrael in lots of ways. Literally, it's someone who wrestles with God. That's how we got the name. Also, the Kabbalists say it means Yashar El, someone who has a direct connection to the divine, or Shir El, the song of the divine. But this is Rabbi Nachman's interpretation in this teaching. It means, may we become active carriers of compassion, so that not only we receive compassion, which is important, but that we are able to transmit compassion to others also. He says this is what hopefully all those journeys are teaching us. So let's begin to transition to practice, and I'll give us some instructions for bringing this into our meditation today. So make yourself comfortable, find a posture that works for you, find the right balance between relaxation and alertness. And even as we just begin to bring our attention within ourselves, let's see if we can have a disposition towards ourselves that is as compassionate as possible, that's welcoming, that's friendly. And we can even try and apply this compassion to anything that's coming up that's challenging, right? If there's any judgment or discomfort or anything else challenging arising, can we even be welcoming and compassionate even to that? Let's pick an anchor for our attention. It's an object that we can bring our attention to and try and keep it as a home base for our attention throughout today's sit. You may have something you use regularly, or if you're not sure what to use, you might want to find a safe part of your body that doesn't bring you too much resistance. People could also use a breath, a mantra, visualization. But choose your anchor. See if we can begin to settle our attention into it now. Noticing that the attention may wander, bringing it back with compassion if we can, seeking to bring compassion in to our inner voice, to our inner leadership. And so this meditation is going to be a tiny microcosm of our life journey. Because that's the way life is structured. Our mystics teach us. They call it a holographic structure sometimes, that each tiny, tiny piece contains the whole. So these few minutes we have together to practice today, this precious time, in its own way is going to be a microcosm of our whole life journey. And our practice is going to be to try and bring our inner voice of compassion, or the compassionate one within us, the compassionate inner parent or teacher or healer, however it manifests. And that voice, that guide, that feeling of compassion can be applied to whatever's going on inside, whatever we're experiencing. So if we're with our anchor, if we're keeping our attention where we want it to be primarily, then we might experience compassion for what's happening with our anchor in that experience of whatever part of the body or whatever experience we've chosen to be our anchor, bringing compassion to that, experiencing it through the lens of compassion. And if our mind wanders, or if other thoughts and feelings come up and we notice them, then we're going to try and see if we can experience bringing compassion for that, and so on. And of course, coming back to our anchor when we notice, and just beginning again when we feel ready. Let's continue in silence, trying to stay with our anchor, bringing compassion to it, and bringing compassion to whatever else may happen along the way with this journey that we're on together. And let's gradually bring this round of practice to a close. Slowly coming back in your own time. Give yourself permission to breathe, yawn, sigh, move your body in any way it wants to. And let's slowly come back. I'll pass it back to Rabbi Mark.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Daniel. Let's seal that beautiful practice. We offer an opportunity for those of you who are in mourning or observing a yard site, those who, for whom it's the custom to join in the mourner's Kaddish to do so. You can put the name or names of those whom you're honoring today in the chat now or after you recite Kaddish. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, as always, thank you for staying present to support those who are. And if you are reciting Kaddish, please join me by rising in body and spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbi, Yamad, Yirach, Yimutei, V'Yamlit, Malchutei, Hayechon, Yomechon, Hayedachol, Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, Bizman, Kariv, V'Yimru, Shmei Rabba, Mevarach, V'Olam, Olamei, Amaya, Yitbarach, V'Yishtabach, Ha'ar, V'Yitramam, V'Yitnaseh, Hadar, V'Yitaleh, V'Yitalal, Shemei B'Kedusha, Baruchu, La'ela, Mikol Birchata, Shirata, Tushbechata, V'Nechemata, Da'amiran, Ba'alma, V'Yiru, Amen. Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'Chaim Aleinu, V'Yalko Yisrael, V'Yiru, Amen. Shalom Alma, Shalom, Yalko Yisrael, Yalko Yoshvei Tevel.
Amen.
May all who are in mourning be comforted among all who mourn. And we're grateful that you're all here. Thank you so much to Rachel Hugon for holding our tech space, and Rabbi Daniel Raphael Silverstein for leading us again so beautifully today. Friends, if you're leaving us now, hope you'll join us tomorrow. El Shai will be leading our sim practice. I'll be leading our practice to sit into Shabbat together on Friday. Of course, we encourage you to stay with us. And if you have a question you'd like to ask, please put it in the chat. Preface it by writing question all in caps, and I'll keep an eye out for your questions and try to work them into the conversation. Daniel, thank you so much. Really beautiful teaching. I just would like to, I mean, it's a beautiful teaching, and there were a lot of pieces to it. I wanted to kind of revisit the piece that I took away that for me was the basis for the practice was this basic teaching. I think you attributed to Nachman that that basically being Yisrael, being a Jew, is means a lifelong commitment to practicing compassion through all the different stages of life. Got that right? Okay. I want to maybe we can go back and unpack some of the dots that he connects to get there, which is a beautiful and timely message. And also core part of what we understand as Jewish mindfulness meditation practice, right? I often just fall back on Sylvia Boorstein's shorthand for that. May I meet this moment fully? May I meet it as a friend? Which is about practicing being hineni, being fully present in the moment, and cultivating friendliness, compassion towards whatever is coming up in the moment, which is breaking news for a lot of Jews, as we know. A lot of us did not grow up necessarily with that message, so it's really helpful to repeatedly get that. So I wanted to ask you if you could connect the dots again just for a moment, because I think first of all, I love, it's a very powerful idea that these 42 or 49 stages of the journey are a paradigm for, it's not just a literal description of the historical sites, to visit along the way, should you go to the Sinai and revisit these sites, but also that they represent these various stages and stopping places in one's life. And what I got from it was a sense of each stage we're kind of visiting and revisiting as a kind of tikkun, as a repair for what's going on, and we affect the tikkun through practicing compassion. So number one, I just want to see if that's accords with your intent, and then maybe you can connect the dots again for a minute with Yaakov. Yaakov has played a role there. Um, thanks.
Can you hear me okay? Is my internet good right now? It
Yes.
was okay, good.
Yes.
So yeah, first of all, you're absolutely right. The Baal Shem Tov and his students talk about how there's a tikkun, there's a fixing, a repair, a beautification to make in each place. And that means, wherever we are in life, whether it seems to be an easy time or a not so easy time, there's something constructive that can be happening. There's some kind of growth that can be happening, whether or not we yet realize what that is, or we may only realize much later, of course, sometimes, but that's definitely the case. So let me try and connect some of the dots of the teaching. There are a lot of pieces, and I wasn't able to give every single one. There wasn't, enough time for that. So he starts with the golden calf. Actually, well, he starts by quoting our parsha and saying, "These are the journeys." And then he brings the analogy
Uh,
from the pages where they say, "Okay, the journeys, elamase, is a tikkun, is a fixing for."
mhm.
These are your gods, O Israel, because there's a parallel phrasing there. And then he draws another early rabbinic source which says idolatry brings divine anger into the world, divine wrath. I didn't mention that part in my prelude to the practice because it's complicated emotionally, to
Right.
start talking about an angry God. But Chassidut and Jewish mysticism in general, and Chassidut specifically, one of its main projects is to reframe our relationship with the source of life, primarily through the lens of compassion. And Rabbi Nachman, for example, the same teacher this teaching's from, he also says in another teaching that the whole reason the universe was made was so that the Infinite One could share compassion. Like that's it. That we know the answer. That's like the question, but like he's very confidently giving us the answer. So the lens that they ask us to look through reality at is that primarily it's about us becoming agents for compassion and being vessels for that infinite compassion to flow. It's based on earlier Kabbalah, but I feel the Hasidic project especially sharpened and
Mhm.
refined it. And so to come back to the flow of the teaching, idolatry brings about divine wrath, but that's because there wasn't enough compassion going on. And this is where I think there's a radical flip. This is where the teaching does works what I think is its magical Hasidic move. We might think that the conventional theology might be, oh, there wasn't enough divine compassion. God wasn't being compassionate enough because God was being angry. But the Hasidic approach is, and this is very consistent with the many Hasidic teachings, when there's a lack of something, it's up to us to do the work. So, so like we might say, like, quote unquote, God was angry, but the Hasidic response to that is then we have to become agents of compassion.
Mhm.
It's on us. We can't control God, but actually, through doing what we can to control ourselves, to change ourselves, mold ourselves, we change everything. And this is based on classic, Kabbalah, the Zohar, and so on, that says we do affect the cosmos, we do affect the divine through the work we do on ourselves. So although we can't click our fingers and make God not be angry, actually God's quote unquote anger is really just an invitation for us to do the work of becoming more compassionate. And then he brings in, it's funny, on the page it's a very short teaching, it's just incredibly dense. Then he brings in the line from Jacob, where Jacob says to his sons, "May God have compassion on you." And he points out that's an acronym for our name, Yisrael, for being us being Israel. And he says
Mhm.
that's what the journeys of Israel are. It's you go through these 42 or 49 stages, getting it wrong all the time, obviously, just like the people did in the desert, but hopefully becoming better vessels for compassion.
Wow. Thank you that was a beautiful, concise retracing of the journey there. So here's my follow-up question is we've been using the English word compassion, right? Not sure so in the source, I'm not sure, what the Hebrew is, but let's talk about that because I'm wondering about compassion is usually the English translation for rachamim, I think. Um, and in the Kabbalistic framework, Rachamim is associated with Tiferet, which follows from after Chesed and Gevurah or Din. In other words, it's kind of a synthesis of of pure love and limitations, and then this balance synthesis of it. Is that what we're talking about? Is that are we taking into account Dean here as well?
Yeah,
Would you say?
beautiful. Yeah, beautifully put. Exactly. Yeah, he uses rachamim and also rachmanut, which is interesting because it's kind of an applied rachamim. It's like the same root, a womb compassion, rechem.
Compassionism.
Compassionism, right? Exactly. Beautiful. So yeah, what you just said is so important, isn't it? That rachamim is you apply compassion by having a healthy synthesis of, as you said, chesed, like this flowing, generous, loving oneness, and then gevura, like a sense of boundaries and appropriateness. But there's another primary meaning for compassion as well that I think is going on with him, which relates back to the other teaching I mentioned before, which is Yud Hey Vav Hey, the infinite one who was, is, and will be, like the primary name of God that we use in our prayers and in the Torah, is the name of compassion, meaning like that God has many faces and qualities, and we relate to God differently in different situations. That primary name that we use most of the time is God's quote unquote face of compassion, according to the ancient rabbis. So I think he's also seeing this as like, as another reason why it's a primary way for, he's suggesting this should be front and center in our practice.
Yeah. So let's dig into that for a little bit because if then kind of the upshot of the teaching here is that being part of Israel means practicing compassionism, right? Call it Judaism, but we're practicing compassionism. And in our little practice here today, um, we're bringing our awareness to our awareness is encompassing that infinite love that you were describing, chesed, right? Boundless love, um, but also incorporating Gevura or Deen, which represents judgment and distinctions and particularity. And it strikes me that that's really like what is what this moment in our world, in our lives, in our history calls for, right? It's it would be naive to say, oh no, we're just pure love. I'm just a proponent of pure love. It's like no, we also need to which is universal, right? There's no particularity in that world, right? But once we introduce Gevura or Dean, there is particularity. There are different peoples there, and they seem to be in competition with each other, right? But then we synthesize it, and we're able to have something that we call compassion, that we call in English compassion, which is Rahmanut or Rahamim, and that takes all of that into account. The distinctiveness and the ability to be loving with difference in the world, right? So I wonder about that, but that's at a macro level. On a micro level, how do we do that in moment to moment practice? Would you say? How do we apply that to our own experience?
So I'll answer that in a second. First, I just want to say one of the things Rachamim does in Kabbalah is it connects the micro to the macro. So actually, your question is like a perfect illustration of that. And one of the models given for that is Jacob's ladder, which goes, from the very specific place on the mud where the bottom of the ladder is on the earth to the infinite heavens, which is, a kind of like metaphor for everywhere at the same time. So when we have compassion for ourselves, which I'll get specific about in a second, it's very much an opening to compassion for everyone and everything. Right? There's a ladder between them, the ladder of compassion. So let's look
Mm,
at how it works in practice. I'm trying to keep my attention on, in my case, very often whatever's going on in my lower body. That's like very often my anchor, and all kinds of other things. Well, all kinds of things might be going on in my lower body. Normally, it's pretty boring. That's why I use it. But then, all kinds of other things might come up, different emotions, different thoughts, different physical sensations, and then they very often will come, as for everyone, with different feelings or stories attached. Like like oh, the reason my back hurts is because I didn't go to the gym enough this week, or um, that twang in my elbow reminds me of that email I didn't send, or whatever it is. So we can just come back to the object. That's fine. Just to come back to the anchor, just let go. And that's one way to practice. But this practice specifically invites us to have compassion on whatever parts of ourselves are speaking to us through those emotions or stories which come up. So like, oh, like the part of me that really, let's say, I'm sure this never happened to anyone here, but let's say like, I keep coming back to my to-do list, like that thing I wish that I'd got done, or all those things that I have to do today or whatever it is. So I can have compassion for that part of myself that's worried about those things or that feels stressed because of those things, whatever, right? Rather, and actually, that's a really healthy, beautiful, healing, important thing to do rather than just kind of like leaving it on the sidelines, pretending it's not there, right? Bringing it in and saying, oh, I see you and that's really hard. You're carrying it a lot and thank you. And I have compassion for you. Thank you for doing everything you do. I appreciate you. That's going to be a lovely integrative healing step rather than just, it being there and us basically trying to ignore it.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. So each of those thoughts, like I didn't go to the gym enough, I didn't send that email. What was it? I don't remember what the third one was, but like all those are, I think, like indicative of the presence of Gevura or Dean, right? And like you're saying, like those are necessary. They play a role. Like, thank you for reminding me, but not right now, right? Yes, I do need to go to the gym. Yes, I do need to send the email. Yes, I do need whatever, right? And it plays a function, but this is really, it just really lifts up that so much of this practice is learning how to I know temper is the right word, but to meet those judgments with a kind of kindness that stems from chesed, right? Comes back around and it integrates, and we're able to hold all of this. So then the goal here is not just to be in a state of blissful love that does not take that into account. This is real, and we are completely unprepared, as someone once said. Okay, we have 2 minutes, and Daniel, you mentioned that you do have a wrap, and we always love to end with one. Before you do, I just do want to also give a shout out once again, and see, Rachel maybe will share in the chat the link to the Applied Jewish Spirituality website. And also a quick reminder, what I mentioned earlier, for those who came a little bit late, we're really delighted and excited that Rabbi Daniel is going to be authoring the coming Jewish year's advanced Torah text study for us based on the Torah commentary of the Me'or Einayim. And I'm really excited about that, looking forward to that. So I just want to give a quick heads up. We'll have the registration and information about that soon. So check out Applied Jewish Spirituality's offerings and stay tuned for that. And Daniel, thank you for taking us out with what you have on offer for us.
Thanks very much so much. I'm looking forward to that too. Okay, here we go. It's funny, yet again, I thought I knew me. How could that be when she's running through me? And she's ever changing a bush that's blazing and somehow not consumed by the flames we naturally try to use language to try and understand, but give experience the upper hand. Feel what's happening, don't try to define it. Compassion arises when we recognize the mind is conditioned for its mission, but we can choose to master it. We can choose to lead instead of running after it. So if you ask me who I am, maybe I will answer ocean, desert, child, dancer. Dust from other galaxies is literally inside me, so no, I wouldn't use language to define me. Thanks, Rabbi Mark. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rachel.
As always, thanks so much, Rabbi Daniel Raphael Silverstein. And thanks to Rachel for holding our space, each of you for being here. Hope you'll join us tomorrow to practice with Yael Shai at our usual time. Many blessings until then, everyone. Please be safe and well.